medicine and sport health. So I'm the CEO of Wellness Academy and work a lot in corporate wellness, in preventative medicine, in cardiovascular medicine, and in wellness. And so I'm delighted to be with you this evening to present our second topic, which is looking at emotional well-being. So it's part of the audit series, and our first one was on physical well-being, and this next one is going to be on emotional well-being, and that is looking at your health and well-being of your brain and your emotions that reflect on the health and well-being of the mind and of the heart, because the two are very connected. So both of them together reflect on your mental wellness, your alertness, and your feeling overall of well-being. So let's get into the presentation. Let's look at some of the common triggers that will affect your emotional well-being that will cause you stress. And the first one, busy work schedules. That's squashing too much into too short a time period. And that in itself can have a lot of stress reactions to the human body, which we'll talk about in a moment. The next one, social pressures, and that is the pressures of other people around you that are trying to affect your corporate performance, affect your health and well-being. And social pressures sometimes can be a serious cause of stress. And competition, of course, is a main factor that affects your overall emotional well-being. And then there are some of the main things that can happen in your life, things like the death of a loved one, or separation, or divorce, or any tragedy in your lifetime can cause you lots of problems. Now, we used to think there was a special scale. It was called the Holmes and Ray scale, and they were some researchers out of California, and they said that you can add up the major elements that cause stress in your lifetime, like divorce, like separation, like losing somebody, and you can allot points to each one of them that can increase the effect of stress. However, in contrast to that, there's another researcher from California, from the University of California, called Lazarus, and said, yes, some of those major stresses on the Holmes and Ray scale we need to observe, but actually it's the everyday stresses that are never released that really cause us problems. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about things like mortgages. I'm talking about job aspirations and the competitiveness in the workplace. Financial worries can cause you major problems. Peer pressure can cause you major problems. So those things that are on an everyday basis can affect you. Things like time rush. So all those sorts of things can really cause a problem and increase your stress. Life changes can cause major stresses as well. You know, life changes may mean a change in your occupation. It may be a change in your health. Those major things that are major life changes can cause an increase in stress. And of course, if you've got family and you're bringing up children, parenting stress can be a problem. You know, you hear words like the terrible teens, when people are, you know, going through adolescence, and that can be a major cause of stress. But also earlier on, it can be a major stress as people are growing up and maybe there are some health problems, and that in itself can be a stressor. And that's the final one. And the final one is your health problems. And if you do have health problems, then the constant effect of negative changes to your health can really cause a stress. So if you start adding all those up together with the everyday stresses, Is there any surprise that a lot of people are stressed, which affects your emotional well-being, which is the thing that we're talking about today? Okay, so um, you've seen this one before. This is the stress curve. Now, we all need stress in our life. And actually, too little stress is almost as bad as too much stress. And so, Dr. Christian Pickard, who's an expert in stress, she says that we've all got 15 or 16 stress resistant factors. So, your work and everyday challenges could use up 9 or 10 of them. Some family issues and challenges can use up another 2 or 3 of them. But you've then got 2 or 3 in reserve to cope with the unexpected. So, where you want to live is that white circle in the middle of the bell curve that is the area where you have enough stress resistant factors to be able to cope with whatever life is throwing at you. But if a major occurrence occurs that increases your stress, or constant everyday stress is increased, then you start to get fatigued. And if they don't go away, you then begin to be very tired, begin to be exhausted. And when that continues, it's an ever increasing circle. You become more anxious, you start to panic, you become more angry, even hostile. And eventually, if you don't cope with the stress, you'll reach burnout and breakdown, that red area on the screen. So the secret to coping with stress and optimizing its effect is to be in that white circle at the top of the bell curve, where you've got a couple of those stress resistant factors in reserve to help you cope with the stress. So that is an important one to me. So what sort of tips can I give you to relieve stress? Well, exercise is a major one, and exercise can really uh, help you combat stress. And what sort of exercise? Well, generally speaking, it's moderate exercise, because with moderate exercise, the release you get is good chemistry, DHEA, the anti-aging hormone, serotonin, the brain connector, oxytocin, the love chemical. If you exercise at a very moderate level, then you get a more prominent release of endorphins. If you're not fit enough, and I'm choosing my words carefully now, if you're not fit enough and you push too hard, then you'll start to produce some of the stress hormones, which are things like adrenaline and cortisol. And we'll talk a lot about those in a moment. Playing with a pet, having a pet, being able to express your affection, again, increases the release of oxytocin, which is the relaxation and love chemical. Equally so, meditation can make a big difference, because if you're able to meditate and literally switch off, then that can have a very positive impact on your emotional well-being and help you relax and produce more endorphin-based chemistry. Taking a small nap can also help. Now, remember from the work we did on sleep, a nap is either 20 to 25 minutes, or it's probably 90 minutes. 20 to 25 minutes, you'll still be in light sleep. And when you wake up, you'll feel a little bit refreshed. If you go through one sleep cycle of REM sleep, dream sleep, and delta sleep, deep sleep, that takes 90 minutes. And if you wake up after that, then you will feel not really feel groggy and feel a little bit refreshed. You wake up in the middle of one of those cycles and you will feel groggy. So how what length of time you use for a nap is very important. And of course, listening to music can help you relax. There's some fascinating research on listening to the classics on your radio, and it's been demonstrated that listening to classical music reduces your blood pressure by 10 to 15 points. Isn't that interesting? So again, in terms of emotional well-being, listening to the right type of music, and maybe not so much heavy metal, but more relaxation music, can really have a benefit on helping you relieve your stress. Okay, and here's one we've used once before, just to remind you what happens when you get into heated debates or arguments. And here's a husband and wife having an argument about reading a roadmap. The husband is driving and the wife is reading the map. And you can see what's happened as the argument starts, because the wife has said something that's got under the husband's skin. What happens to his heart rate? It zooms up. And then in the middle of the argument, you can see his heart rate is oscillating and changing virtually in a millisecond, from sort of 90 beats to up to 140, 150 beats. What's causing that? The release of two stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And what do? They will tighten your tubes, your circulation. They will increase the pressure on your heart. They will flood cholesterol into your bloodstream. And if it carries on for a long period of time, it can cause some quite serious damage. But here's the interesting one. Look at what happens when the argument is finished. Well, look at the heart rate. It remains elevated when the argument ends. And what's the half-life of things like adrenaline and cortisol? Well, the half-life is 4 to 8 hours. So, when you've lost the plot, and you think you've calmed down or cooled down afterwards, well, your body chemistry hasn't. So it carries on for quite a period of time. So having techniques to neutralize these sorts of responses are very, very important, important indeed. So let's move on to our next slide. So some quite amazing research that's come out of Harvard University and the medical school. And they looked, it's called the hothead heart. They looked at 1,300 men, average age around 62 years, and they were all heart disease free. But those who regularly had high anger scores were three times the number of heart attacks. Isn't that amazing? Because of the chemistry that I described earlier about your circulation tightening up, your blood pressure increasing, cholesterol being flooded into your system. So it's no surprise that if you're regularly suffering periods of anger and hostility, you're increasing your risk of potential heart problems. And then they looked at 1,600 heart attack victims. So these are people that have already had heart attacks, and they were interviewed to check their anger levels right before the event, the heart attack itself. And the result of that was anger more than doubles the likelihood of a heart attack. So when you are losing the plot, your body chemistry reacts on challenging your heart and your circulation and your brain, and that can increase risk quite dramatically. Now, while we just look at that caveman there, you can see those two little purple blobs on top of the kidneys. They're called the suprarenal glands. And when they get excited and encouraged to produce changes in your body chemistry, the middle of the gland, it's called the medulla, it increases the production of adrenaline, which tightens your blood pressure, ramps up your heart rate. The outside of the gland, though, quite interestingly, is called the cortex, and that releases cortisol. Now, you've probably heard of cortisol. If you've got a housemaid's knee or tennis elbow, you can be injected with cortisol. But too much of it can be counterproductive to your health because it wipes out part of your immune function attached to your white blood cells called the T lymphocytes. And they've helped to fight off infection. So what do so many people in the business world do? Well, if they're going on holiday in 3 weeks' time, Christmas coming up, we can think of that, which can be a stress in itself. But what happens is they work extra hard to clear their desk, to keep everything nice and tidy and make sure nothing is left when they have a break from their work. And what happens to them for the first 2 to 3 days when they leave their work? They get an infection, get a virus. Why? Because they've been working so hard. There's been an extra release of those white blood cells, the T lymphocytes, that damage your ability to fight off infection. And so often you see that when people go on holiday, they work extra hard, and then when they go on holiday for the first 2 to 3 days, they get a virus. So these are some of the effects that will affect your emotional well-being. Okay, so the stressometer. There's the one that we need to keep in that sort of orangey zone right at the top there. If it goes over to the deeper orange and the red, then we're in trouble. So, what should we do during the day? Well, there's a book written called The Corporate Athlete, and it's written by the author is Jim Lear, and Lear is spelled Lehr. And Jim Lear says that every 70 to 90 minutes, we should take a brain break where we practice a certain technique of breathing that can affect a special nerve in the center of our chest called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve connects the systems in your thorax, particularly your heart, to your brain. And the vagus nerve, if it's excited, can really cause an increase in stress and the stress chemistry. But if it's relaxed, it's called a vasovagal reaction, an expansion of the circulation. Then that will stimulate relaxation, the potential production of endorphins. And he says that we should all take a brain break every 70 to 90 minutes and practice some techniques that support our relaxation. So if we're sitting at our desk, they may simply be breathing techniques, but it's so important not to keep switched on constantly throughout the day without taking some brain breaks. Now, here's a question. How many meetings have you been to where the meetings have gone on and on and on and on, and actually you become more and more stressed with the prolongation of those meetings? So brain breaks are very, very important. And so things to practice that are equally important, we need to focus on mindfulness, and that's the techniques that you can use to relax the mind. Now, there are so many apps around that are used for that, things like Headspace, that practicing mindfulness can really, really help. And doing it at the start of a day and at the end of a day has been shown to be even more fulfilling. So, linking that to meditation techniques and ways in which you can relax. And again, there are so many of them, and yoga is one of them. Tai Chi is another one of them. Just taking some activity that tenses the muscles and then releases the muscles and relaxes the muscles are so important. And again, doing the same with the mind. So when you are meditating and practicing mindfulness, then thinking of something that you associate with a good feeling is so, so important. So I've just seen a thing that flashed up on the screen there. Can somebody give me the title of the book? The book is called The Corporate Athlete that I mentioned earlier, and it's by Jim Lear, Lehr. So these practices on the screen now are so important. And you know, getting into an environment, if you can, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes at lunchtime, where you can feel the effect of nature, take in some fresh air, that's an added value to supporting the things on the screen there that you can see in terms of mindfulness and meditation and yoga and relaxation. So important. So, what sort of things then help us decline and affect our emotional well-being? What sort of negative things relate to the four quadrants there, business habits. Well, I'm pretty sure you can guess what they would be. Working extra long hours and not being able to switch off. Another key one in as a negative business habit is not being able to delegate. So, you have the Lone Ranger syndrome. Only you can do the job and nobody else can, and you're not able to share. And that is a classical bad business habit that sometimes can't be avoided. Um, Being overambitious, being, you know, overzealous in terms of the goals that you want to achieve to the point where you make a rod for your own back is the statement that's so very often used. So there's a series of business habits that can help you decline and affect your emotional well-being. What about eating habits that aren't great for you? Well, eating at your desk. I once did some audits of a major company in Scotland, and they had nowhere to go for a break at all throughout the day. It was a major company. And when I said to one lady at a desk, "So where do you eat?" She took a keyboard, turned it upside down, and all the crumbs dropped all over the desk. And she said, "We eat at the desk." So they never even got up from their desk. And that's a bad business, bad eating habit. Eating fast food, which generally isn't the healthiest type of food. And then with the word fast, eating quickly on the run. There's a thing at the base of your brain called the apostat, and it doesn't know you are full in terms of eating until you've been eating for at least 20 minutes. So if you're in a time rush and eating on the rush, then A, you're likely to overeat, and B, you're not able to digest your food properly. So lighter meals, particularly in the middle of the day, are so important. So those are some of the bad eating habits. Lifestyle behaviors, well, you can probably guess some of them. Alcohol abuse, substance abuse, too much smoking, and actually the jury's out on vaping, because there's some research out now to show that long-term vaping may have a negative effect on your health. Another lifestyle behavior: late nights, compromising on your sleep. Going to bed very, very late isn't great for your emotional well-being, and that can compromise your sleep. And then finally, exercise habits. Well, the obvious one is no exercise at all. And that's when that will help people put on weight, not give them resilience in terms of their health and well-being. Too intense exercise can be bad for you. There's a real concentration now on HIIT training. Well, true HIIT training, when you're pushing yourself to 90% of your capacity, can be actually quite dangerous for your health if you're not fit enough to go there. If you are, it's fine. But overzealous exercise can actually have a negative effect on your emotional well-being. Exercising in a rush. One of the classic signs I give to top executives I work with is when you look at your work week, what do? You diarize and timetable the work you've got to do. Do you put exercise in there? Do you actually diarize time for your own exercise and your own health and well-being? And it's so interesting. Nearly always the answer is, "Oh no, I never thought of doing that." So important to do. And of course, the other worst one is if you are too overzealous with your exercise, you could end up being injured. So all of those things, I call it the landscape of decline, can lead to an impact in a negative sense on your emotional well-being. So important to note those. So let's look at the emotional landscape then, and let's look at the four quadrants that we've touched on before. So let's look at stress, the first quadrant. As we flick onto it, if people are too stressed, and let's see if we get that onto the next slide. Yeah, frustrated, they become angry, they become anxious, they become defensive, they lose their sense of humor. And what do you think the chemistry of that is? Well, the chemistry is shown there: adrenaline and cortisol. Compare that with the right-hand side on the next slide, and you can see if you're in charge of what you're doing, you're having a good day and you're able to cope with everything, and actually you have winning behaviors, you're more dynamic, you're more passionate about what you do, you're more confident in what you can do, you enjoy what you're doing, and you're more connected. And that last word, connected, is key, because that means you're fully engaged, you're fully energized, that make a difference. So how do you feel then if you go home after a night of stress? And the next slide will show us some of the words that described there are loss of interest, you're cynical, you want to be on your own, you're so tired, you're exhausted, you feel defeated, and you feel burnt out. And very often that's when people can run the risk of some substance abuse and certainly drinking too much alcohol. But compare that to how do you feel when you go home after a day where you had a great day and everything went well. Let's look at the next slide. And you can see you feel when you go home cool under pressure, you're in control of what you're doing, you're relaxed, you're peaceful, and you're energized, and you probably want to share your successes. What's the chemistry on that side? The anti-aging chemical DHEA, serotonin, the one we mentioned before, the brain connector, oxytocin. The chemistry of the left-hand side, cortisol, affects your immune function. Adrenaline affects your blood pressure. Interleukin 6, that affects the insides of your arteries and roughens them up. We all spend time living on the left-hand side of the emotional landscape. But if we spend a lot of our time over there, I can promise you one thing: you'll have health problems, and it will dramatically affect your emotional well-being. So I love this emotional landscape because it really makes us think of where we are in terms of our health and well-being. So what can happen if you are constantly over that left-hand side? It's a thing called anhedonia, loss, total loss of engagement for life. And that's when people start to literally switch off and detach themselves from everyday purposeful living, and that can really affect your emotional well-being. So spending time on the right-hand side of that emotional landscape is so important. Okay, so there are the three major influences around stress. The amount of work and the amount of stuff you've got to do is the volume. If it's too much, stress increases. The next one is time. If you haven't got the time to cope with all the things you've set up, that can add to the amount of work you've got, and those two together, volume and time, can compromise you. And then this is a key one: control. Are you in control of your own work output, energy output, and way of life? And if you are in control, that can neutralize stress. But if you're not in control, and that so often happens to people in middle management, where they get stresses and pressures from above and from below, then you can get all sorts of challenges to your emotional well-being. So what are some of the signs of stress? Well, here are some of them. Common signs of common signs of chronic stress: aches and pains. You know, everything hurts. Your joints hurt, your muscles hurt, you feel stiff because you probably haven't slept very well. And so aches and pains are very often synonymous with stress. You lose your energy. You know, you feel depleted, you feel tired all the time. It's almost like a natural way of what you expect of living because you're under so much stress. And what does that do? It helps compromise your ability to concentrate. So you can't concentrate on the tasks in hand. That leads to muscle tension, tightness, that feeling of real tension throughout your body, and difficulty in sleeping. And you become more nervous, you become more anxious. These are some of the classic signs of too much stress, tipping over the right-hand side of that emotional stress curve that I showed you earlier. So, next slide. What sort of things should we take that can really help you combat the effects of stress and help you build your resilience? Well, the classic treatments that we can use by taking on board Dual Life Day and Dual Life Night are fantastic supplements for helping you cope with your everyday stresses and helping you build resilience. The Dual Life Day, using a lot of the ingredients that are on the screen there, will help you build resilience and energize you during the day. And the Dual Life Night will help you relax and sleep and help remember your cells to repair. So those two are very, very important. And I think they are the sort of hallmarks of emotional well-being and healthy living. Um, also, naturally, because of the impact of emotional well-being on mental alertness and well-being, Dual Life My Mind is a key one, because that then will help focus healthy inputs to your mind and help you reduce the impact of any stresses throughout the day. So those are two or three great products that we should be bearing in mind and recommending to people. And of course, my blood is the fourth one, because what's the main carrier of all the key chemistries around our body? It's your blood. So as you can see there, the B vitamins together with manganese and selenium, all of those, iodine is protective factors, all of those together will make a real impact on supporting your emotional well-being. So important. And finally, pro immuno can help protect you against infection, viruses, and really support your body's ability, especially when it's under stress and under pressure. And here's a technique that I love to recommend. I use it a lot with people. It's called freeze frame. And freeze frame is a technique of reducing the stress in your body. And there are 5 steps. So the first thing I want you to do is imagine an issue, a challenge that you have that you really need to solve. Step 1 is press an imaginary pause button. It's like putting your car into neutral. And so you are literally disengaging from the worry and the concern just for a moment in time by pressing an imaginary pause button. Step 2, shift your focus to the area around your heart and breathe rhythmically through the heart, in for 5 seconds and out for 5 seconds. Now, you don't breathe in through your heart, you breathe in through your nose and your mouth. But what I get people to do is spread the fingers, put them over the area of the heart in the middle of your chest, and imagine as you're breathing in, the air is coming in through the fingers and out through the fingers. So as you inspire to a count of 5 seconds, you breathe in deeply. And as you expire to a count of 5 seconds, you breathe out, imagining that air is coming in and out the spaces you've created in your fingers over your heart. That focuses on the heart. Now, the next step is equally important. Step 3 is, just for a moment in time, re-experience a positive feeling from something you associate with being relaxed, with being loved, with being appreciated. Could be lying on a beach waiting for the waves or listening to the waves coming in and out. It could be a hug from a loved one. It could be a great feeling of something you've accomplished. But go there and actually imagine, just for a moment in time, for 1 or 2 minutes, that you're actually experiencing that very positive feeling as you're doing the breathing. And then that's the time when you should ask yourself, what would be a more efficient and effective response to the challenging situation I asked you to think about? So and then immediately write down the first thoughts and words that come into your mind. Now, how many times have you received an email that's really upset you and you've reacted very quickly? And the minute you press the keyboard, send, you think to yourself, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that. So this technique of freeze frame, hence the name freeze, is so important to practice and cope with stresses and pressures. So important. Good on stresses. So coming towards an end now. Key things: you must take regular breaks. Do you take all the holidays and vacations that you should be taking? And if you do, that's so, so important. And so many people don't do that. They edge into their what should be their holiday to keep working. Not a good idea, because your body, your heart and mind need time to relax and chill out and wind down. It's going to benefit your emotional well-being. So that's an important one. Do you share problems with family and friends? Or are you the sort of person that keeps everything in? Well, if you've got trusted family and friends, then sharing is caring. And a trouble shared is a trouble halved. And that can affect the production of the hormones, or the good hormones we talked about, and help support your emotional well-being. And next slide. Do you get upset at small things? And when we're under stress and we're under pressure, very often the smallest little thing can irritate us. Being stuck in a traffic queue that you can't do anything about, being stuck in a line in a supermarket where you can't get to the till and you've only got one or two products you want to purchase. Do you get upset? Do you let things get to you? These are the times when you practice those breathing techniques to neutralize those effects, and then that will support a positive effect on your emotional well-being. Okay. And remember, when you go to bed at night, don't forget, if you're worried about anything, practice a brain dump. Write things down on a pad in abbreviated form and put them away from the bedside, because you can't do anything about them when you're going to sleep. So by brain dumping and writing the key issues down, all the things you've got to do tomorrow, that just makes you realize you can relax and you just shelve them and put them at ease, is so, so important. So a brain dump before bedtime is very, very good as well. And if you can, it's easy to say, it's harder to do. I appreciate that. But if you're constantly under the effect of time rushing, you're going to increase the stress and impact in a negative sense on your emotional well-being. So build in those breaks throughout the day. Remember Jim Lear's comment? Having a brain break every 70 to 90 minutes. So important to do. And time management, of course, is key. So creating things like to-do lists, prioritizing the key things you've got to do, and planning for them effectively, and listing the tasks are so important, that will then lead to achievement and help and support very positive emotional well-being. And remember the chimp. Remember the amygdala, it's called, that little chimp in the midbrain reacts 200 times more readily to stress and pressure than the higher centers of the brain, the cortex. So if you can, those breathing techniques, again, avoid the chimp kicking in and causing you too many problems. Okay. And finally, when in doubt, remember, breathe slowly inwards and slowly outwards. Remember to put your hand over your heart and breathe out, and that will help neutralize a whole series of things. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the presentation today. Just a final word about the Healthy Living Foundation. You look at social media and look at the great work and efforts they produce to support people looking after their health and well-being. So connect with them on all the aspects of social media. Thank you so much for listening to me. As ever, you've been great, and look forward to seeing you all very, very soon, I hope. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.